Hey, Reddit. I never thought I'd be here, spilling my guts to a bunch of strangers on the internet, but life has a funny way of blindsiding you when you least expect it. My name's Brian, and I've been married to Vanessa for 10 years. We've had our ups and downs, like any couple, but I always thought we were solid. I guess I was wrong. It all started last Saturday. I was out for lunch at one of my favorite restaurants, nothing fancy, just a quiet place where I could unwind and think. I had been dealing with a lot of stress at work, trying to close a major deal with my business partner, Mike. Mike and I had been friends since college, and we started our company from the ground up. We were like brothers, or so I thought. I was halfway through my meal when I heard it, Vanessa's voice. At first, I thought I was imagining things. I mean, what were the odds that my wife would be at the same restaurant at the exact same time, right? But then I heard her laugh, that unmistakable laugh I knew so well, and my heart stopped. She was sitting in the booth right behind me. I couldn't see her, but I could hear every word she was saying. And she wasn't alone. There was a man with her, someone who sounded awfully familiar. I leaned back slightly, just enough to catch a glimpse, and my blood ran cold. It was Mike, my business partner, my friend, the man I trusted with everything, my work, my life, my secrets. And there he was, sitting with my wife, laughing and talking like they didn't have a care in the world. My stomach churned as I listened to them, the words they were saying cutting deeper than any knife. "I can't believe he still hasn't figured it out," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Brian's so clueless, it's almost pathetic." "I know, right?" Mike replied with a chuckle. "But hey, it works out for us. As long as he keeps the money coming in, we're golden." I felt like I was going to be sick. They were openly mocking me, right there in public, like I was some kind of joke. But the worst part? Mike. He wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was using me. I was the one keeping him afloat, the one making sure his bills were paid and his life was comfortable, all while he was sneaking around behind my back with Vanessa. I don't know how long I sat there, frozen in shock, listening to them tear me apart. My mind was racing, my emotions a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. I wanted to storm over there, to confront them both, to demand answers. But I knew that would only make things worse. I needed to be smart about this, to think it through. So, I finished my meal, paid the check, and walked out of that restaurant with a plan forming in my mind. Vanessa and Mike thought they had me fooled, but they were about to learn just how wrong they were. They thought they could keep this up, keep using me, but I was going to turn the tables on them. I was going to make them regret ever thinking they could cross me. This is just the beginning. There's a lot more to come, and I'm going to make sure they both pay for what they've done. After that disastrous lunch, I couldn't get their voices out of my head. Every word Vanessa and Mike had said echoed in my mind, fueling the anger that had begun to burn inside me. But I knew better than to act impulsively. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. It was about my livelihood, my reputation, everything I had worked so hard to build. If I was going to confront them, I had to be smart, calculated. The first thing I did was start gathering evidence. I wasn't going to go into this battle without being fully prepared. I needed to know just how deep this betrayal ran. I installed a few discreet cameras around the house, focusing on areas where Vanessa was most likely to have her private conversations. I also set up tracking on her phone and computer. I hated the idea of spying on my wife, but after what I had heard, I needed to know the truth. Over the next few days, I collected more than enough evidence to confirm my worst fears. Vanessa and Mike had been carrying on their affair for nearly a year. The messages I found between them were graphic, explicit, and filled with the kind of mockery that only made my blood boil further. But it wasn't just the affair that got to me. It was the way they talked about me, like I was some clueless fool, someone they could use and discard at will. But there was one thing that gave me pause, one thing that made me reconsider how I was going to handle this. Mike had mentioned, in one of his messages, that he was heavily in debt. Apparently, without the income from our business, he'd be screwed. His lavish lifestyle, the fancy cars, the expensive vacations, all of it was funded by the money I brought in. And that's when it hit me. I had the power here, not them. Instead of confronting Vanessa and Mike outright, I decided to bide my time and come up with a plan that would hit them where it hurt the most. I started by quietly pulling back from the business, siphoning off funds into a separate account that Mike didn't have access to. I knew he wasn't paying close attention. He trusted me to handle the finances, just like he trusted me to be blind to what he was doing with my wife. That was his first mistake. Next, I reached out to a lawyer, someone with experience in high-stakes divorces and corporate law. I didn't want this to be a messy, public ordeal. Not yet. Anyway, I needed to make sure all my ducks were in a row before I dropped the bombshell. The lawyer helped me start the process of gathering more evidence, not just for the divorce, but also to protect my business interests. I wasn't going to let Mike take everything I'd built, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let Vanessa walk away with half of it. But the real kicker came when I decided to play the long game. I started acting like nothing was wrong, like I was oblivious to what was going on behind my back. I was still the loving husband, the trustworthy business partner, all while slowly dismantling their lives behind the scenes. It was almost too easy. Vanessa was so wrapped up in her affair with Mike that she didn't notice the small changes. And Mike? Well, he was so busy enjoying the benefits of our business that he didn't see the walls closing in around him. A few weeks later, I decided it was time to make my first real move. I arranged a dinner with Mike, under the guise of discussing a new business opportunity. He showed up to the restaurant, all smiles and confidence, completely unaware of what I had in store. We talked shop for a while, going over the usual numbers and projections. I could see that he was already mentally spending the money he thought we'd be making. And that's when I dropped the first bombshell. "Mike, I've been thinking," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I think it's time we restructure the business. Change things up a bit." He looked at me, puzzled. "Restructure? What do you mean?" I think it's time we bring in some new blood. Maybe even consider selling off part of the company. We've had a good run, but it might be time to diversify." He hesitated, clearly thrown off by the idea. "I don't know, Brian. We've always kept things between us. Why change that now?" I shrugged, keeping my tone casual. "Just a thought. But if you're not on board, we can always go our separate ways. I've been considering stepping back, maybe even selling my shares." His eyes widened in alarm. "Selling your shares? You can't be serious." "Oh, I am," I replied, watching the panic spread across his face. "But don't worry, Mike. I'd make sure you get first dibs. After all, we're partners, right?" The look on his face was priceless. He knew he couldn't afford to buy me out, not with the kind of debt he was drowning in. But I wasn't done yet. "Of course, there's always the option of merging with another company," I continued, as if I hadn't just dropped a bomb in his lap. "I've been in talks with a few interested parties. They're willing to pay top dollar, but they'd want a controlling stake." Mike was practically sweating now. I could see the gears turning in his head, trying to figure out how to keep his cushy lifestyle without losing everything. And that's when I knew I had him. "I'll tell you what," I said, leaning in. "Let's give it some thought. We don't have to decide anything right now. But if you're interested, I'm sure we can work something out that benefits both of us." He nodded, though I could tell he was barely holding it together. I smiled, knowing that I had just planted the seeds of doubt and fear that would soon grow into full-blown panic. Over the next few weeks, I kept up the charade, watching as Mike slowly unraveled. He was more distracted at work, more irritable, and I could tell the stress was getting to him. Vanessa, on the other hand, was oblivious. She continued her affair with Mike, completely unaware that I was setting them both up for a fall. One evening, after another business meeting with Mike, I decided it was time to take things to the next level. I started leaking bits of information to our competitors. Nothing too obvious, just enough to make them curious about our company's financial stability. At the same time, I began pulling more funds from the business, diverting them into accounts that Mike couldn't touch. It was a slow bleed, but it was effective. Mike started noticing the missing money, the sudden interest from competitors, and the whispers of a possible takeover. He came to me, panicked, asking if I knew anything about what was going on. I played dumb, of course, assuring him that everything was fine, that he was just being paranoid. But I could see the doubt in his eyes, the fear that he was losing control. Meanwhile, I continued to gather more evidence of the affair. Vanessa was so wrapped up in her double life that she didn't notice the cameras, the tracking, the subtle changes in our bank accounts. She was too busy enjoying her time with Mike, thinking that she had everything under control. But the truth was, she was walking into a trap, one that I had carefully laid out for both her and Mike. The day finally came when I decided to confront Vanessa. I had everything I needed, the evidence of the affair, the financial records, the recordings of their conversations. I knew that once I laid it all out, there would be no denying what she had done. It was a Saturday morning, and I waited until the kids were out of the house before I approached her. She was in the kitchen, making breakfast, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. "Vanessa, we need to talk," I said, my voice calm and steady. She turned to me, a look of mild concern on her face. "Sure, what's up?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I know about you and Mike." The color drained from her face, and she dropped the spatula she was holding. What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Vanessa," I said, my tone hardening. "I've known for weeks. I've seen the messages, heard the conversations. I know everything." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Brian, I can explain." "Save it," I snapped, cutting her off. "There's nothing you can say that will make this right. You betrayed me, Vanessa. You and Mike both. And now, you're going to pay for it." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she took a step toward me. "Brian, please, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake." "A mistake?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "This wasn't a mistake, Vanessa. This was a deliberate, calculated betrayal. And now, you're going to face the consequences." She started crying, pleading with me to forgive her, to give her another chance. But I was done with her lies, done with the charade. I laid out everything. How I had been quietly pulling money from the business, how I had set Mike up to fail, how I had prepared for the divorce that was now inevitable. Her tears turned to sobs as the reality of her situation sank in. She knew she was trapped, that there was no way out. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of satisfaction. I had taken back control, and there was nothing she or Mike could do to stop what was coming. The following week, I served Vanessa with divorce papers. She was devastated, but there was nothing she could do to change my mind. I had already made my decision, and I wasn't about to back down. The evidence of her affair was airtight, and my lawyer assured me that I had the upper hand. But this wasn't just about the divorce, it was also about the business. Mike had no idea that I had been slowly dismantling our partnership, siphoning off funds and setting the stage for a hostile takeover. By the time he realized what was happening, it was too late. The competitors I had been quietly feeding information to swooped in, offering to buy out my shares at a premium price. Mike was left scrambling, trying to find a way to keep the company afloat, but without my financial backing, he was screwed. The creditors started closing in, and it wasn't long before the entire company was on the verge of collapse. Meanwhile, Vanessa was forced to move out of our home and into a small apartment. She had nothing, no money, no support, and no one to turn to. Mike, the man she had thrown everything away for, was too busy trying to save his own skin to offer her any help. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, I kept my distance from Vanessa. I wanted nothing to do with her, and I made it clear that the only thing we had left to discuss was the division of assets. But even that was a formality. I had made sure that she would walk away with as little as possible. Mike, on the other hand, was in free fall. The company was on the brink of bankruptcy, and his personal finances were in shambles. He tried to reach out to me, to make amends, but I ignored his calls. He had made his bed, and now he had to lie in it. The final blow came when the deal to sell my shares went through. I walked away with a tidy sum, more than enough to start fresh and rebuild my life. Mike, on the other hand, was left with nothing. The company was sold off in pieces, The assets liquidated to pay off debts. He lost everything: his business, his reputation, and his lavish lifestyle. And as for Vanessa, she was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. She tried to reach out to me, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, but I was done with her. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, was gone. All that was left was the hollow shell of someone who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. The money from the sale of the company allowed me to start a new business, one that I ran on my own, without any partners. I kept things small, manageable, and most importantly, I kept my personal life separate from my work. Vanessa tried to reach out to me a few more times, but I never responded. She was a part of my past, a chapter that I had closed for good. I heard through the grapevine that she was struggling to make ends meet, that she had taken a low-paying job just to survive. Part of me felt sorry for her, but another part of me felt vindicated. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. As for Mike, he disappeared from my life entirely. The last I heard, he had moved to another state, trying to start over after losing everything. I didn't care what happened to him. I was just glad he was out of my life for good. With the divorce finalized and my new business up and running, I started to focus on my own happiness. It wasn't easy. There were still days when the pain of betrayal would creep up on me, when I would remember the life I had lost. But those days were becoming fewer and farther between. I started dating again, cautiously at first. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just someone to spend time with, someone who could help me forget the past. But as time went on, I began to realize that I was ready to move on, to open myself up to the possibility of love again. And that's when I met Rachel. She was everything Vanessa wasn't: kind, honest, and supportive. We took things slow, getting to know each other without rushing into anything. But the more time I spent with her, the more I realized that I was ready for a fresh start. Rachel was a breath of fresh air in my life. She understood what I had been through, and she never pushed me to move faster than I was comfortable with. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could be myself, without the weight of my past dragging me down. We spent our weekends exploring the city, trying new restaurants, and just enjoying each other's company. It was a stark contrast to the life I had lived with Vanessa, a life filled with lies, deceit, and betrayal. With Rachel, everything was simple, honest, and real. As our relationship grew, so did my confidence. I started to see that the life I had lost with Vanessa wasn't worth mourning. I had been given a second chance, an opportunity to build something new, something better, and I wasn't going to let the past hold me back. One day, while Rachel and I were out shopping, I ran into Vanessa. It was the first time I had seen her since the divorce, and the sight of her took me by surprise. She looked different, thinner, more tired, like the weight of everything had taken its toll on her. She spotted me and hesitated, as if unsure whether to approach. But then she did, offering a tentative smile. "Hi, Brian," she said, her voice soft. "Vanessa," I replied, my tone neutral. We stood there for a moment, awkwardly shifting from foot to foot. Finally, she spoke again. "How have you been?" "Good," I said simply. "And you?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "I'm getting by. It's been tough." I nodded, unsure of what else to say. There was so much history between us, so much pain, but also a strange sense of closure in seeing her again. "This is Rachel," I said, gesturing to the woman beside me. Rachel smiled politely, and Vanessa's eyes flickered with recognition. "Nice to meet you," she said, though I could hear the sadness in her voice. We exchanged a few more pleasantries before parting ways. As Rachel and I walked away, I felt a strange sense of peace. Seeing Vanessa again didn't hurt the way I thought it would. In fact, it only reinforced how far I had come, how much I had healed. As the months went on, my relationship with Rachel continued to grow. We moved in together, taking the next step in our journey as a couple. It was a big leap, but one that felt right. I had learned from my past mistakes, and I was determined not to let history repeat itself. Rachel and I talked openly about everything: our hopes, our fears, our dreams for the future. It was a level of communication I had never had with Vanessa, and it made all the difference. I knew that with Rachel, I had found someone who truly understood me, someone I could trust with my heart. I wasn't naive enough to think that life would be perfect from here on out, but I was optimistic. I had been through hell and back, but I had come out stronger, wiser, and more determined to live a life filled with love and honesty. Looking back on everything that had happened, I realized that as painful as it was, the experience had taught me valuable lessons. It had shown me the importance of trust, communication, and self-respect. I had learned that it's okay to let go of the past, to forgive, and to move forward with hope. My relationship with Rachel was proof that even after the darkest times, there can be light. She had brought joy back into my life, and for that, I was eternally grateful. I also found peace with the situation with Vanessa and Mike. I no longer harbored the intense anger and resentment that had once consumed me. I had let go, and in doing so, I had freed myself from the chains of the past. Today, I'm in a place I never thought I'd be after everything that happened. I'm happy, truly, deeply happy. I've built a new life, one that's filled with love, trust, and honesty. Rachel and I are talking about the future, about marriage, and maybe even starting a family. It's a conversation I'm excited to have, not one that fills me with dread. To anyone who's going through something similar, I want you to know that there is hope. It's not easy, and it takes time, but healing is possible. You just have to keep moving forward, one step at a time, and never lose sight of what you deserve. Life isn't perfect, but it's good. And that's enough for me. Thanks for listening, Reddit.